It is Monday, October the 9th, 1989, and we are in the Nikolaikirche, or St. Nicholas Church, in Leipzig, in eastern Germany. The church is full, with more than 2,000 people for the weekly Friedensgebet, or Prayers for Peace service, including 600 Stasi collaborators who had been sent by the secret police to prevent provocations. These weekly prayers for peace had begun 7 years earlier in 1982 with just a few participants. But by 1989, the church, the largest Lutheran church in Leipzig, was regularly completely filled for these services. As had become the custom, at the conclusion of the prayers, the congregation spilled out into the nearby streets, carrying candles to signify their peaceful intentions. To join on this October evening, 10,000 other citizens of Leipzig already in the streets surrounding the church, determined to continue their peaceful demonstrations against the East German government and the Russian occupation of their land. The church's pastor, in explaining the reason for the candles, said, "If you carry a candle, you need two hands. You have to prevent the candle from going out. You cannot hold a stone or a club in your hand." And so, what became known as the miracle of Leipzig came to pass. The following Monday, 150,000 peaceful demonstrators were in the street, and the Monday after that, 300,000. The local Stasi head was reported to have said, "We were ready for everything except prayers and candles." 1 month after the October 9th prayers and demonstration, the Berlin Wall fell, without a single shot being fired. I tell you this story about the St. Nicholas Church because the creator of the music of this hymn was once cantor or music director at this church, as well as being employed at the more famous Thomaskirche, which is about a kilometer away. That musician was, of course, Johann Sebastian Bach, whose arrangement of what we know as the Passion Chorale is the version most commonly used today. From 1723 until his death in 1750, Bach was responsible for all the music in both churches on every Sunday and all special occasions throughout the year. It wasn't until 1948 that the bodily remains of Bach were transferred from the church in which he had originally been buried to the Thomaskirche itself, where they remain until today. I have often thought that it must be very intimidating to the musicians and choristers of the Thomaskirche who perform Bach's cantatas and other works by the master throughout the year, to know that he is resting just under the floor in the center of the nave down below them. I do know that it was a very moving experience for me to sit in that church and listen to Bach's music, knowing that his grave was just a few meters away. In addition to his weekly cantatas based on the texts for each Sunday of the year, Bach wrote 4 major oratorios, or passions, for the Easter season. The first of these, the St. John's Passion, was premiered in the Nikolaikirche on Good Friday in 1724. The second one was the St. Matthew Passion, a setting of chapters 26 and 27 of Matthew's Gospel, from which our Passion Chorale hymn tune comes. The St. Matthew Passion probably had its first performance in the Thomaskirche on Good Friday, April the 11th, 1727. This Passion, which is really an oratorio similar to Handel's Messiah, consists of 65 sections, including many solo recitatives and arias, some choruses, with several chorales or Lutheran hymns interpolated into the work. One of these, number 54 in the standard version of the work, is what we call the Passion Chorale. The text for this chorale, which in German begins with O Haupt voll Blut und Wunden, O head full of blood and wounds, was based on a medieval Latin hymn and had been translated into German by Paul Gerhardt in the 17th century. The English text has had a number of translators. Perhaps the most famous is the late Victorian poet Robert Bridges, whose 1899 version from the original Latin, beginning O Sacred Head Sore Wounded, is the one most commonly used today. Although our Common Praise hymn book, number 198, uses a version by two other translators, beginning with O Sacred Head Surrounded. All three of these translators use the Latin and then German versions of the hymn, so it's fair to say the meaning of all the texts is similar. In common with almost all of the Bach chorales we know and use today, Bach did not compose the melody himself, but used an earlier tune, a secular love song, in fact, by one Hans Leo Hassler, that had been adapted for church use by Johann Krüger, a famous hymn composer from the 1600s. You will likely know the great hymn that begins, Now Thank We All Our God. It is another of Krüger's famous hymns. Bach, of course, took the Hassler-Krüger tune and applied his magical use of harmony to it, giving us the rich version we have today. One of Bach's great innovations to the composition of music for hymns was to make all four vocal parts, that is, soprano, alto, tenor, and bass, interesting and melodic in their own right, while still contributing to a rich harmonic whole. For example, here is the bass part for the first line of the chorale. It makes a perfectly acceptable tune on its own. And now, here's the tenor line. And then for the altos, who so often have to put up with boring, repetitive parts within a narrow range of notes, Bach wrote them something a little more interesting. In fact, the Bach arrangement works as an acceptable piece of music without needing the melody at all. Here is the first line using just the alto, tenor, and bass parts, and I think you'll see what I mean. But now, when we add the soprano part, which has the tune, all these somewhat complex and independent parts come together as a totally satisfying whole. Here is the complete verse. To finish with, here is the complete hymn as found in our hymn book. For verse 1, I've used the string section of the orchestra, verse 2 uses the woodwinds, verse 3 the brass in quite a restrained way, and for the final verse, I've used the whole orchestra. One final musical note. In the original usage in the St. Matthew Passion, the chorale is played in a higher key than the one that has been used to accommodate congregational use in our hymn book. When the music is restored to its original key, which is a fourth higher, the full soaring effect of Bach's glorious composition is even more apparent.